International tax experts here in Washington, D.C. say they expect Israeli banks to hand over the names of U.S. citizens and residents suspected of tax evasion.
Prime Minister of Israel.
Previous American administrations have avoided scrutinizing Israeli banks because of the strong bilateral relationship, according to former Justice Department official Michael Durney.
Well, there is focus. I mean, obviously, there are banks worldwide. Historically, the Israeli banks have been left alone, but now our government, and in particular the Department of Justice, is going after fairly aggressively as many banks as they can, which does include Israeli banks.
There's also been an understandable sympathy for those holding dormant legacy accounts set up by Jews hiding assets from the Nazis in Switzerland. In 2008, it emerged that former UBS executive Bradley Birkenfeld blew the whistle on his bank's multi-billion-dollar offshore business, opening Switzerland up to intense scrutiny. Some of the money shifted towards Israeli banks in Switzerland and other offshore havens, according to tax attorney Kevin Thorne.
I think a lot of money either was in Switzerland and in Israel to start with, or money moved from Switzerland to the Israeli banks. But I think the important thing you have to remember is the U.S. government has always had good relations with Israel as well as their financial institutions. And as time moves forward, more and more banks will get themselves into compliance by making sure that all of their clients file the proper paperwork and disclosing those accounts, especially if they're U.S. citizens.
The U.S. Department of Justice recently made public an indictment of 3 U.S.-based tax preparers. 2 are Israeli citizens. They allegedly work with 2 unnamed banks, A and B, which the indictment clearly infers are Bank Leumi and Bank Hapolim. Bank Leumi has made no comment, but Israel's biggest bank has provided information to JN1, suggesting Hapolim was included in a group of Swiss banks handing over statistical information about US clients to Washington. But Hapolim insists it's constrained by Swiss secrecy laws and can't hand over the names. Switzerland has recently resisted American pressure to allow legal exceptions on banks other than UBS.
I don't think the Swiss are ready for the Israeli banks to give over information. I think there's still issues around how much information will be released and how much the Swiss are still protecting their bank secrecy laws. So I don't think they're ready for full cooperation.
Several Israeli banks have branches in cities like Los Angeles, New York and Florida. American officials can apply pressure on them by threatening a criminal indictment, which would result in an automatic shutdown of U.S. operations.
They have the ultimate ability to shut them down. You know, if you want to do business in the United States, comply with our requests. If you don't want to do business with us, fine, go away.
The U.S. has recently set up a voluntary disclosure program, enabling evaders to pay their back taxes, a heavy fine, and avoid criminal prosecutions. The fines are lower for untouched Holocaust accounts. This voluntary disclosure program is open-ended, so it gives account holders some time to review their options. But international banks are now keen to dump these US clients, fearing the consequences of a new law which comes in next year called FATCA, imposing stringent reporting requirements worldwide. This is Daniel Wrenches for JN1 at the Department of Justice in Washington.